Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
The brass key slipped in my trembling fingers as I stood outside apartment 3B, fighting exhaustion after 21 grueling hours of travel. 3 weeks in San Diego had drained every ounce of energy from my body, and all I wanted was to collapse onto my familiar couch and sleep for 12 straight hours. But the key wouldn't turn. I jiggled it, pulled it out, examined it closely, then tried again. Nothing. My heart began racing as I fumbled through my wallet. Double-checking I had grabbed the correct key ring. I called my mother, expecting her to laugh about some silly mistake. Instead, her voice turned ice cold. "We changed the locks, Colin. Your father and I are taking your apartment as payment for the 28 years we spent raising you." My phone almost slipped from my sweaty palm as my mother's words echoed through the narrow hallway. The fluorescent light above flickered ominously, casting strange shadows across the faded carpet beneath my feet. I pressed my back against the cool wall, struggling to process what she had just said. "Mom, what are you talking about? This is my apartment. I pay the rent. I signed the lease." Her laugh carried a bitter edge I had never heard before. "Oh, Colin, you sweet, naive boy. Did you really think we were going to let you live there for free after everything we've invested in you? Free, I pay $800 a month in rent. I've been paying it for 3 years. Now that money barely covers what you owe us for raising you. Do the math, honey. 28 years of food, clothing, medical bills, private school tuition, college expenses. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars." I slumped against the wall, my leather travel bag sliding down my shoulder. The hallway suddenly felt like it was closing in around me. "You can't be serious. You're my parents. That's what parents do. And now it's time for you to pay us back. Consider this the beginning of your debt settlement." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone's black screen. My reflection looked back at me from the device, showing a man who appeared 10 years older than he had that morning. I pounded on the door with my fist, the hollow sound echoing through the empty corridor. "Hello? Is someone in there? This is Colin Martinez. I live here." Mrs. Henderson's door creaked open across the hall. The elderly woman peeked out through the chain lock, her gray hair wrapped in bright pink curlers. She had always been friendly, often accepting packages for me when I worked late. "Colin, oh my goodness, what are you doing out there?" "Mrs. Henderson, my key isn't working. Do you know what happened?" She unlatched her chain and stepped into the hallway, her fuzzy slippers shuffling against the worn carpeting. Her expression grew uncomfortable as she avoided my eyes. "Well, dear, your parents moved in about 2 weeks ago. They had a big yellow moving truck and everything. They told everyone you had given them the apartment as a gift because you were moving to California permanently." My stomach dropped to my feet. "They what?" They seemed so happy about it. "Your mother kept talking about how generous you were letting them retire in such a nice place. Your father was directing the movers, telling them where to put all their furniture." I leaned against the door frame, feeling dizzy. "Mrs. Henderson, I never gave them this apartment. I was on a business trip. I work for a marketing firm here in Phoenix. I'm not moving anywhere." Her wrinkled face creased with concern. "Oh no, dear. Are you sure they had keys and everything? They knew exactly which apartment was yours." My hands shook as I dialed my father's number. He answered on the first ring as if he had been waiting for my call. "Hello, son. How was California?" "Dad, what the hell did you do to my apartment?" His voice remained calm and measured, the same tone he used when explaining financial concepts to his accounting clients. "We made a sound business decision, Colin. Your mother and I calculated exactly how much money we've spent on you over the years. The apartment represents a reasonable down payment on what you owe us." "I don't owe you anything. You're my parents. We're also investors who deserve a return on our investment. Do you have any idea how much it costs to raise a child these days? We're talking about $233,000. not including college tuition and living expenses we covered until you were 25. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the hallway floor, my head spinning with disbelief. You can't just steal my apartment. We didn't steal anything. We have all the proper documentation. While you were gone, we visited the county recorder's office with your old power of attorney papers from when you had surgery 5 years ago. Technically, we had legal authority to act on your behalf. Those papers expired years ago. Are you sure about that? Because our lawyers seemed to think they were still valid. We also used some joint account information from your college years to verify our authority over your finances. My throat constricted as the full scope of their betrayal became clear. What joint account information? The savings account we opened for you when you turned 18. The one where we deposited your birthday money and summer job earnings. Turns out you never officially closed it or removed our names. Banks are very accommodating when parents need to access family assets. I scrambled to my feet and rushed to the lobby, pulling out my phone to check my banking app. My primary checking account, which had contained $4,300 when I left for San Diego, now showed a balance of $12.37. Dad, you emptied my bank account. We transferred family funds to cover immediate expenses. Your mother needed new furniture for the apartment, and we had some outstanding debts to settle. Those weren't family funds. That was my money, my salary. Money that you earned using the education we provided, living in a body we nourished and cared for with a mind we helped develop. Everything you are is because of us, Colin. It's time you acknowledge that debt. I found myself standing in the apartment building's small lobby, surrounded by fake plants and motivational posters about community living. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, creating an almost nauseating buzz that matched the chaos swirling through my brain. Where's my car? A pause. What car? My Honda Civic. Where is it? Oh, that. We sold it. Needed the cash for moving expenses, but don't worry, we got a good price. $1,500. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered across the lobby's tile floor. I stared at it for several seconds before picking it up. My movements slow and mechanical. You sold my car. It was getting old anyway, high mileage. We did you a favor by handling that burden. I walked outside into the blazing Arizona heat, my travel bag still slung over my shoulder. The parking space where I had left my car 3 weeks ago was empty, except for an oil stain and a few scattered leaves. My entire life had been systematically dismantled while I was 2,000 miles away, completely unaware that the people I trusted most were destroying everything I had worked to build. Standing on the sidewalk, I realized I was essentially homeless, with no transportation and $12 to my name. But as the initial shock began to wear off, something else started building inside me. Not despair, not depression, anger. Pure, focused anger that cut through the confusion like a blade. They thought I was helpless. They thought I would just accept their betrayal and disappear quietly. They were about to discover exactly how wrong they were. The law office of Walsh and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a glass building downtown, its modern reception area, filled with leather chairs and abstract artwork that projected competence and success. I had found Jessica Walsh through an internet search for attorneys specializing in family financial disputes, and her reviews suggested she had extensive experience with cases involving financial abuse. Jessica was a woman in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and prematurely gray hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She listened to my story while taking detailed notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally stopping to ask clarifying questions about dates, amounts, and specific documents. Colin, I have to be honest with you. This situation is more complex than most family financial disputes I handle. She spread several law books across her mahogany desk and pulled up legal databases on her computer screen. Your parents have created what I call a legal gray area. They've been very clever about exploiting outdated paperwork and dormant accounts. But they stole from me. They forged my signature. Actually, they probably didn't forge anything. The power of attorney document you mentioned, even if it's technically expired, still exists in county records. Some institutions accept those documents if they appear legitimate, especially when the people presenting them have extensive personal information about the account holder. My heart sank as she continued explaining the legal complexities. The joint savings account from your college years is particularly problematic. Even though you haven't used it in years, if your parents' names are still on the account, they technically have legal access to transfer funds between family accounts. But I never authorized any transfers. You didn't need to. Joint account holders have equal access to all funds regardless of who deposited the money. The bank sees all account holders as having equal ownership. Jessica pulled out a thick folder and began laying out forms and legal precedents. However, there's something very important you mentioned that changes everything. You said your apartment was purchased with inheritance money from your grandfather. Yes, my grandfather Samuel left me $50,000 when I died 3 years ago. I used that money for the down payment and closing costs. Was that inheritance money held in a trust? I nodded. Yes, there was a family trust. I had to sign papers with a lawyer to access the funds. Jessica's demeanor shifted, and she began typing rapidly on her computer. Colin, if your inheritance was held in a legitimate trust and your parents accessed those protected funds without proper authorization, they've committed federal wire fraud. Trust funds have very specific legal protections that can't be circumvented by old power of attorney documents or joint account access. She printed several documents and highlighted specific sections with a yellow marker. I need you to gather every piece of paperwork related to your grandfather's trust. Bank statements showing the inheritance deposit, real estate documents for your apartment purchase, and any trust documentation you still have. I keep copies of everything in a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Perfect. We'll need all of that. But Colin, I need to warn you about something. Even if we can prove federal crimes were committed, the legal process could take years. Meanwhile, your parents are living in your apartment and you need immediate relief. I leaned forward in the leather chair, feeling a mixture of hope and frustration. What kind of immediate relief? We can file for an emergency restraining order and demand immediate return of your property. But that requires proving imminent financial harm and showing that your parents pose a continued threat to your assets. They've already stolen my car, my money, and my apartment. How much more threat do we need? Jessica smiled grimly. In the eyes of the court, we need to prove they're likely to cause additional harm. Do you have any evidence that they're continuing to misuse your identity or access your accounts? I pulled out my phone and showed her my banking app. They are still making charges on my credit cards. Look, there's a $500 charge at a furniture store yesterday and a $300 charge at an electronics retailer. That's perfect. They're actively committing ongoing identity theft. This gives us grounds for immediate legal action. She began drafting legal documents while explaining the process. I'm going to file 3 separate actions simultaneously. First, an emergency restraining order demanding they cease all use of your financial accounts and return your apartment within 72 hours. Second, a civil lawsuit for conversion and financial abuse. Third, I'm going to contact the FBI's white-collar crime division about the trust fund violations. As she worked, I felt my confidence returning. For the first time since standing outside my apartment, I had a plan and professional help. But Jessica's next words reminded me that victory wasn't guaranteed. Colin, you should know that family financial abuse cases are emotionally devastating for everyone involved. Your parents are going to fight this, and they're going to try every manipulation tactic they can think of. They'll claim you're ungrateful, that you're destroying the family, that they were acting in your best interests. Are you prepared for that kind of psychological warfare? I thought about my mother's cold voice on the phone and my father's calculated explanation of their theft. They already declared war on me. I'm just finally fighting back. Good, because we're going to need documentation of everything they've done, and we're going to need witnesses who can verify their actions. Do you have any family members or friends who might have information about their financial situation or their plans? Suddenly, I remembered someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My uncle Marcus, my father's brother. They had some kind of falling out about 5 years ago. He might know something about my parents' financial problems. Jessica handed me a list of information she needed me to gather. Contact your uncle. Contact anyone who might have insight into your parents' motivations. Financial abuse like this rarely happens in a vacuum. There's usually an underlying desperation that drives people to betray their own children. What do you mean? People don't typically steal from family members unless they're facing serious financial pressure themselves. Your parents might be in deeper trouble than you realize, which could work in our favor. Desperate people make mistakes, and mistakes leave evidence. As I left Jessica's office, I felt like I was finally moving from defense to offense. My parents had ambushed me while I was vulnerable and unprepared. But now I had legal representation, a plan of action, and a growing determination to expose whatever desperation had driven them to such extreme betrayal. They wanted to play hardball with my life. They were about to discover that I had learned a few things about strategy during my 28 years on this planet. I hadn't spoken to my Uncle Marcus in over 3 years, not since he had stormed out of my cousin's wedding reception after a heated argument with my father. The fight had been about money, something related to their father's estate, but I had never learned the details. Now sitting in my hotel room with Jessica Walsh's contact list, I realized Marcus might be the key to understanding my parents' desperation. His phone number was still in my contacts, and he answered on the second ring. "Colin, is that really you?" His voice carried genuine warmth, completely different from the cold calculation I had heard from my parents. "Hi, Uncle Marcus. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I need to ask you some questions about Dad." A long pause. "What's your father done now?" "You say that like you were expecting something." "Colin, your father has been walking a tightrope for years. I've been waiting for it to snap." "What happened?" I explained the entire situation from the apartment theft to the emptied bank accounts. Marcus listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of acknowledgement or disgust. When I finished, he was quiet for several seconds. "Colin, can you meet me tomorrow morning?" "There are things you need to know about your father that I probably should have told you years ago." We agreed to meet at a diner called Murphy's Kitchen on the west side of town. Marcus arrived first, already seated in a corner booth with a manila folder thick with documents. He was a stockier version of my father with grayer hair and weathered hands that spoke of decades working in construction management. "Before we start," he said, sliding a cup of coffee across the table, "I want you to know that I felt guilty for years about not warning you. I told myself it wasn't my business, that family loyalty meant keeping quiet about Robert's problems. I was wrong." He opened the folder and spread out bank statements, photocopied checks, and what appeared to be internal company memos. "Your father has been embezzling money from his accounting firm for at least 8 years, maybe longer." The coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "What?" "Small amounts at first. A few $100s here and there, money he could justify as legitimate business expenses. But it escalated. Last year alone, he stole over $60,000 from client accounts." Marcus pointed to highlighted entries on bank statements. "I know this because one of those clients was me. Robert was handling my business accounts, and I noticed discrepancies in my quarterly statements. When I confronted him, he broke down and admitted everything." "Why didn't you report him?" "He's my brother. I thought I could help him get clean, make restitution, fix things quietly. I was an idiot." Instead of getting help, he doubled down. Started stealing more money to cover the original theft. The documents painted a picture of systematic financial fraud spanning years. Client funds diverted to cover personal expenses, fake invoices for services never rendered, and elaborate accounting tricks designed to hide missing money. "That's not even the worst part," Marcus continued. "Your father has a gambling problem. Poker games, sports betting, casino trips to Las Vegas. He owes money to some very dangerous people. He pulled out a photograph taken with a long telephoto lens. It showed my father meeting with a man in an expensive suit outside a restaurant downtown. That's Vincent Corelli. He runs an illegal lending operation for people who can't get money through legitimate channels. Your father owes him at least $50,000. The photograph made my blood run cold. My father looked terrified in the image, his shoulders hunched defensively, as he handed an envelope to the intimidating man beside him. Vincent doesn't forgive debts, Colin. He collects what he's owed one way or another. Your parents aren't just desperate for money, they're running scared from someone who won't hesitate to hurt them if they don't pay up. Marcus leaned across the table, his expression grave. Stealing your apartment and your money wasn't greed, Colin. It was panic. They needed cash immediately, and you were the easiest target. As I absorbed this information, Marcus made a phone call. Danny, it's Marcus. Remember my nephew Colin? I told you about he needs your help. Within an hour, I was sitting in another coffee shop meeting Danny Rodriguez, a private investigator who had been Marcus's friend since high school. Danny was a compact man, with an easy smile and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings. Marcus filled me in on the basics. Danny said, pulling out a tablet computer. I did some quick research on your parents while driving over here. Your mother, Patricia, isn't just a victim in this situation. He showed me property records and business filings. She's been running an illegal short-term rental business for the past 2 years. Multiple properties around Phoenix that she's been listing on vacation rental websites without proper permits or tax reporting. The screen displayed photos of 3 different apartments and houses, all featuring my mother's distinctive decorating style. She's pulling in about $4,000 a month in unreported income, which means she owes the IRS approximately $35,000 in back taxes. So they're both criminals. It gets worse. I found evidence that she's been using fake identities to rent some of these properties. Identity theft, tax evasion, fraudulent business practices. Your mother could be looking at serious federal charges. Danny scrolled through more documents on his tablet. The timeline is interesting. Your parents' illegal activities started ramping up about 6 months ago. That's when your father's gambling debts reached critical levels, and Vincent started pressuring for payment. Marcus nodded grimly. They've been scrambling to generate cash any way they can. Legal, illegal, it doesn't matter to them anymore. But here's the thing that might help you, Danny continued. Desperate criminals make sloppy mistakes. They've left a paper trail that leads directly to federal crimes. If we can document everything properly, we have enough evidence to destroy them legally. He handed me a business card. I'm going to do a complete investigation of their activities over the past year. Bank records, property transactions, rental income, gambling losses, everything. It'll cost you $2,000, but by the time I'm finished, we'll have enough evidence to put them both in federal prison. I stared at the business card, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of my parents' criminal activities. $2,000 is almost everything I have left. Marcus is covering the cost, Danny said. He feels responsible for not stopping this sooner. As we left the coffee shop, Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. Colin, I know this is hard to process. Your parents aren't evil people, but they've made choices that crossed lines they can't uncross. The question now is whether you want to just get your property back or whether you want to make sure they face consequences for what they've done. Standing in the parking lot, I realized my situation had completely changed. I wasn't just a victim of family betrayal anymore. I was someone with the power to determine my parents' future. They had stolen from me, assuming I was powerless to fight back. They were about to learn exactly how much power their desperate crimes had given me. Jessica Walsh's office had been transformed into a war room. Documents covered every surface with color-coded files organized by type of evidence and legal strategy. Danny Rodriguez had delivered his investigative report the previous day, and the scope of my parents' criminal activities was staggering. Quack! Colin, we have enough evidence to destroy your parents financially and legally, Jessica said, spreading the latest documents across her desk. The question is, how far you want to take this? She pointed to different stacks of papers. Federal wire fraud for accessing your trust fund, tax evasion for Patricia's illegal rental business, embezzlement charges for Robert's theft from his accounting firm, identity theft for the fake documents they used to access your accounts. We're talking about potential prison sentences of 5 to 10 years each. Danny leaned back in his chair, consulting his tablet. I also confirmed that Vincent Corelli has been pressuring them aggressively. I have photographs of him visiting your apartment twice in the past week. Your parents are terrified. What kind of pressure? The kind that involves broken bones if they don't pay up soon. Vincent's reputation isn't built on patience or forgiveness. Marcus, who had been quiet during most of the meeting, finally spoke up. Colin, I want you to consider something before we proceed. Your parents are trapped in a situation that's spiraling out of control. They've made terrible choices, but they're also facing genuine danger from Vincent. Are you suggesting I should feel sorry for them? I'm suggesting you might be able to use their desperation to your advantage without destroying them completely. Jessica looked up from her legal documents. What are you thinking, Marcus? Vincent wants his money. Robert and Patricia want to avoid prison. Colin wants his property and his life back. Maybe there's a way to solve everyone's problems simultaneously. Danny's eyes lit up with understanding. You're talking about leveraging the debt situation? Exactly. What if Colin approaches Vincent directly and negotiates a deal help Vincent recover his money in exchange for Vincent putting pressure on Robert and Patricia to return Colin's property? Jessica frowned. That's incredibly dangerous. Vincent Corelli isn't someone you negotiate with casually. It's also brilliant, I said, the strategy becoming clear in my mind. My parents think they're hiding their criminal activities from me. They have no idea I know about Vincent or their other illegal schemes. If I approach this strategically, I can use their secrets against them. Marcus nodded. Vincent gets his money, which eliminates the immediate physical threat to your parents. Your parents get scared into compliance without facing federal prison time. Colin gets his property back and gains leverage to prevent future betrayals. Danny was already pulling up information on his tablet. I can arrange a meeting with Vincent through my contacts in the Phoenix Police Department. He's not exactly a violent criminal, more like a businessman who operates outside traditional banking regulations. People in his position often prefer negotiated settlements over messy confrontations. What would I offer him? Information about your parents' assets and a plan for recovering his money that doesn't involve violence or criminal charges that would complicate his life. Jessica began drafting legal documents while we talked. I'm going to file a restraining order against your parents immediately. That gives us legal authority to remove them from your apartment within 72 hours. Meanwhile, Colin can approach Vincent and negotiate the debt situation. How do we know Vincent will cooperate? Danny smiled. Because men like Vincent prefer business solutions to violence. Violence attracts police attention, complicates operations, and creates long-term problems. A negotiated settlement where everyone wins is always preferable. The meeting with Vincent took place 2 days later at a restaurant downtown. He was exactly as intimidating as Marcus had described, but also more professional than I had expected. Instead of the stereotypical criminal, I had imagined Vincent appeared to be a well-dressed businessman who happened to operate outside legal boundaries. Your uncle's friend tells me you have a proposal regarding your father's debt, Vincent said, cutting directly to the point. My father owes you $50,000. I can help you recover that money, but I need something in return. What kind of something? I explained the apartment situation and my parents' theft of my property. Vincent listened without emotion, occasionally asking clarifying questions about amounts and timelines. Your parents have been very creative about avoiding their obligations to me, he said finally. Creative in ways that have cost me time and money. I can provide you with documentation of all their assets, income sources, and bank accounts. I can also ensure they comply with any payment schedule you establish. In exchange for what I need you to pressure them to return my apartment and my property within 72 hours. After that, you can work directly with them to recover your money. Vincent was quiet for several minutes, apparently considering the proposal. Your father's gambling debt has been a significant inconvenience for me. Your mother's rental income represents a reliable source of monthly payments. If I can access that income stream directly, the debt becomes manageable. So you'll do it. I'll visit your parents tonight and explain that their debt situation requires immediate resolution. I'll suggest that returning your property might be a gesture of good faith that demonstrates their commitment to honoring their obligations. As I left the restaurant, I felt like I was finally moving from defensive to offensive strategies. My parents had ambushed me while I was vulnerable and unprepared, but now I had legal representation, documented evidence of their crimes, and leverage over their most dangerous creditor. That evening, Jessica filed the restraining order with the county court. The document required my parents to vacate my apartment within 72 hours and cease all access to my financial accounts immediately. Sheriff's deputies would deliver the order the following morning. I spent the night in my hotel room reviewing all the evidence Danny had gathered and preparing for the confrontation that was coming. My phone rang at midnight. It was my mother, her voice shaking with terror. "Colin, we need to talk." "About what?" "About the apartment, about everything. There are things you don't understand about our situation." "I understand perfectly. You stole my home, my car, and my money because you're criminals who owe money to dangerous people." A sharp intake of breath. "How do you know about that?" "I know about Vincent. I know about Dad's embezzlement. I know about your illegal rental business. I know everything." Several seconds of silence. "Colin, we're your parents. We love you. We were trying to protect you from getting involved in our problems. By stealing everything I own, we were desperate. We thought we could fix everything and pay you back before you even knew what happened. We never meant for it to go this far." "Well, it did go this far. And now you have 72 hours to return my property and move out of my apartment. Or what? Or you'll discover that I've learned a few things about leverage and consequences while you've been busy destroying my life." I hung up and turned off my phone, knowing that tomorrow would determine whether my parents understood exactly how much power their crimes had given me. They had assumed I was helpless and naive. They were about to learn they had seriously underestimated their target. The sheriff's deputies arrived at my apartment building at exactly 9 a.m., their patrol cars creating a small spectacle that drew curious neighbors to their windows and doorways. I stood beside the lead deputy, Sheriff Martinez, holding copies of the restraining order and eviction notice, while Jessica Walsh reviewed the legal documents one final time. "Mr. Martinez, the court order is very clear," Jessica explained to the deputy. "The defendants have unlawfully occupied this apartment and must vacate immediately. They've been given 72 hours notice, which expired at midnight." Deputy Martinez nodded and knocked firmly on the apartment door. "This is the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. We have a court order requiring immediate evacuation of these premises." The door opened slowly, revealing my father in a wrinkled bathrobe and slippers. His face was pale, and dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept in days. Behind him, I could see my mother sitting on what used to be my couch, surrounded by cardboard boxes and garbage bags. "Hoshid Tatstrai Robert Martinez." Deputy Martinez asked, consulting his paperwork. "Yes, that's me." "Sir, I'm serving you with a restraining order and eviction notice. You and Patricia Martinez are required to leave this apartment immediately and cease all contact with Colin Martinez for a period of 60 days. My father's eyes found mine across the doorway. "Colin, please. Can we talk about this privately? We're family." "The time for private conversations ended when you stole my home." I replied, my voice steady and cold. Jessica stepped forward with a locksmith named Steve, who began examining the door locks with professional efficiency. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, you have exactly 10 minutes to remove your personal belongings from these premises. Anything left behind becomes the legal property of the rightful tenant. My mother emerged from the apartment, her mascara smeared and her hair disheveled. Colin, honey, please don't do this to us. We're your parents. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can work something out. You had 3 weeks to work something out. Instead, you sold my car and spent my money on furniture for the apartment you stole from me. Deputy Martinez checked his watch. Ma'am, you now have 9 minutes and 30 seconds. The next few minutes created a surreal scene as my parents frantically gathered their belongings under the supervision of armed law enforcement officers. Neighbors had gathered in the hallway and courtyard, whispering among themselves as they watched the drama unfold. Mrs. Henderson approached me hesitantly. Colin, dear, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were lying about the apartment. They seemed so happy, and they had keys. It's not your fault, Mrs. Henderson. They're very good liars. As my parents carried boxes and suitcases to the parking lot, my mother made one last desperate attempt at emotional manipulation. Colin, if you go through with this, you'll destroy our entire family. Your father will lose his job. I'll lose the rental properties. We'll have nothing left. You should have thought about that before you decided to steal from me. We were trying to protect you from our problems. We thought we could fix everything quietly. By committing federal crimes using my identity, my father paused in the doorway, a heavy box in his arms. Son, there are things about our situation that you don't understand. Dangerous things. I understand perfectly. You owe Vincent Corelli $50,000, and you've been stealing money from your accounting clients to cover gambling debts. You're both facing federal prison time for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. The box slipped from my father's hands, crashing to the floor and spilling clothes across the hallway carpet. His face went completely white as he realized the full scope of my knowledge. How do you know about Vincent? I know everything, Dad. I know about the illegal rentals, the embezzled client funds, the fake documents you used to access my accounts. I also know that Vincent visited you twice this week to discuss your overdue payments. My mother began crying uncontrollably, collapsing onto a nearby chair. We're ruined. We're completely ruined. Deputy Martinez announced that time was up. Ladies and gentlemen, this property must be vacated immediately. Any remaining items will be removed by county personnel. As my parents gathered their final belongings, I noticed Vincent Corelli's distinctive black sedan pulling into the apartment complex parking lot. He stepped out wearing an expensive suit and dark sunglasses, his presence immediately commanding attention from everyone present. Robert, Patricia. Vincent called out, his voice carrying easily across the courtyard. I believe we had an appointment to discuss your payment schedule. My father's knees literally buckled, and he had to grab the doorframe for support. Vincent, this isn't a good time. On the contrary, this seems like the perfect time. I see you're moving out of your son's apartment. That suggests you're finally ready to take responsibility for your obligations. Vincent approached our group with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. Colin, I presume your proposal was most helpful. Your parents and I have reached an understanding regarding their debt. What kind of understanding? They're going to transfer ownership of Patricia's rental properties directly to me as collateral for the money they owe. The monthly rental income will cover their debt payments, and they'll retain ownership once the principal and interest are fully satisfied. My mother looked up through her tears. We agreed to that arrangement last night. It seemed preferable to the alternatives Vincent described. Deputy Martinez was growing impatient with the extended conversation. Folks, this property needs to be cleared immediately. Any personal discussions can continue in the parking lot. As my parents carried their final boxes to their car, my father approached me one last time. Colin, I know we've destroyed your trust, and I know we don't deserve forgiveness. but I want you to understand that everything we did came from desperation, not greed. Desperation caused by your own criminal choices. Yes, and those choices hurt you more than anyone else. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, I heard genuine remorse in his voice. His shoulders were slumped in defeat, his eyes red with exhaustion and shame. Being sorry doesn't fix what you did. No, it doesn't. But maybe someday you'll understand that people can make terrible mistakes without being terrible people. Steve the locksmith finished installing new locks on my apartment door and handed me fresh keys. All done, sir. Nobody's getting in there without your permission. As my parents drove away with their belongings, I stood in the parking lot holding the keys to my reclaimed home. The apartment was empty except for a few pieces of furniture they had been unable to move quickly. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating a space that felt both familiar and foreign. Jessica Walsh appeared beside me, reviewing her legal documents. Colin, the restraining order remains in effect for 60 days. Your parents cannot contact you directly or come within 500 feet of your apartment during that time. What happens after 60 days? That depends on whether they comply with the restitution agreement and whether you decide to pursue federal charges for the trust fund violations. Standing in my reclaimed apartment, I realized that justice felt different than I had expected. I had won completely, but the victory carried an unexpected weight. My parents were broken, people facing consequences that would affect them for years. I had the power to destroy them completely or offer them a path toward redemption. The choice was mine, and for the first time in weeks, I was the one in control. 3 weeks after reclaiming my apartment, I sat across from FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen in a sterile conference room at the federal building downtown. The table between us was covered with financial documents, bank records, and evidence of my parents' criminal activities that could result in decades of prison time. Mr. Martinez, the evidence you've provided is comprehensive and damaging, Agent Chen said, flipping through Danny Rodriguez's investigative report. Your father's embezzlement scheme involves over $200,000 in client funds stolen over an 8-year period. Your mother's tax evasion represents approximately $80,000 in unreported income. She pointed to specific documents highlighting the scope of their crimes. The wire fraud charges related to your trust fund access alone carry a potential sentence of 20 years in federal prison. Combined with the other charges, we're looking at life-changing consequences for both defendants. What are my options? You can proceed with full prosecution, which would likely result in lengthy prison sentences and complete financial ruin for your parents. Or you can cooperate with a plea agreement that focuses on restitution and rehabilitation, rather than punishment. Agent Chen explained that my father had already been contacted by the FBI and was cooperating fully with their investigation into accounting fraud within his firm. His testimony had led to arrests of 3 other accountants who had been running similar schemes. Robert Martinez's cooperation has been valuable to our ongoing investigation. He's provided evidence that will help us recover funds stolen from dozens of elderly clients who trusted these men with their retirement savings. Is he going to prison? That depends partly on your willingness to support a plea agreement. Your father faces mandatory minimum sentences unless we can demonstrate that he's provided substantial assistance and shown genuine remorse. The meeting lasted 2 hours as Agent Chen walked me through the legal process and potential outcomes. My parents could plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for making full restitution, undergoing financial counseling, and accepting probation with strict monitoring. The alternative was federal trial and potential decades in prison. I need time to think about this. Of course, but I should mention that your father has asked to speak with you. He's been in federal custody for 5 days, and he's expressed genuine remorse for his actions. That afternoon, I visited my father at the federal detention center. He looked older and smaller. Then I remembered wearing an orange jumpsuit and sitting behind reinforced glass in the visitors area. His hands shook as he picked up the phone to speak with me. "Colin, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't. I understand why. I've had 5 days to think about what we did to you, and I realize there's no excuse for our actions. None." He leaned forward, his voice breaking with emotion. "I want you to know that your mother and I never intended to hurt you. We were drowning in debt and panic, and we made the worst possible choices. Tell me about the gambling." My father was quiet for several seconds, staring at his hands. "It started small. Poker games with friends from work, then trips to the casino on weekends, then online betting sites. Before I realized what was happening, I was in debt for more money than I could ever repay." "How much money?" "Over the past 3 years, I lost approximately $160,000 gambling. Most of that was money I stole from client accounts." The number hit me like a physical blow. $160,000. I kept thinking I could win it back. I kept believing that one big score would fix everything. Instead, every bet made the problem worse. He explained how the gambling addiction had consumed his judgment, leading to increasingly desperate attempts to cover losses with stolen money. The embezzlement had started as small loans he planned to repay, but quickly spiraled into systematic theft. "When Vincent started threatening us, your mother and I panicked completely. We knew you had that inheritance money from your grandfather, and we convinced ourselves that borrowing it temporarily would buy us time to fix everything. Borrowing, you stole my apartment and my car. We told ourselves it was temporary. We planned to pay you back everything plus interest once we resolved our debt problems. We never intended to permanently take your property. But you did take it, and you lied about it, and you would have let me lose everything to protect yourselves." My father began crying, his shoulders shaking with the weight of his shame. "You're right. We were willing to destroy your life to save our own. That makes us terrible parents and terrible people." "What about Mom?" "Your mother's rental business started as a legitimate way to generate extra income to pay down my gambling debts. When we realized how much money we owed Vincent, she started cutting corners on permits and taxes to maximize our cash flow. The illegal activities escalated because we were running out of time and options." As I listened to his explanation, I began to understand the desperate spiral that had led to their betrayal. They weren't evil people who had decided to hurt me. They were broken people who had made terrible choices under extreme pressure. "Dad, Agent Chen says you've been cooperating with their investigation. I've told them everything. About my embezzlement, about the other accountants who were stealing money, about Vincent's operation, about your mother's tax evasion. I'm not trying to minimize my responsibility or avoid consequences. I just want to help fix some of the damage we've caused. What happens now? That depends on whether you're willing to support a plea agreement. Without your cooperation, your mother and I will probably spend the rest of our lives in federal prison. With your support, we might have a chance to make restitution and eventually rebuild some kind of relationship with you." The visit ended with me feeling emotionally drained, but clearer about my path forward. My parents had betrayed my trust in the worst possible way, but they were also people facing consequences that would destroy any chance of redemption or family reconciliation. A week later, I met with my mother at a supervised visitation center. She had been released on bail pending her plea hearing, and she looked haggard and defeated. Her hands shook as she poured coffee from a thermos she had brought. Colin, I've spent every day since this happened thinking about how we failed you as parents. You didn't fail me as parents. You committed crimes against me as criminals. Both things are true. We were your parents first, which makes our betrayal even more unforgivable." She explained how the rental business had started legitimately, but evolved into a complex scheme to hide income and avoid taxes. The pressure to generate cash quickly had led to shortcuts that became criminal activities. "I want you to know that your father and I have enrolled in counseling programs. Gambling addiction treatment for him, financial responsibility classes for both of us. We're trying to understand how we became people capable of hurting you. Is it helping? It's helping us understand that our actions weren't just mistakes. They were choices that revealed character flaws we didn't want to acknowledge. As our conversation continued, I realized that my parents were genuinely trying to take responsibility for their actions and change their behavior. They weren't making excuses or blaming external circumstances. They were facing the reality that they had become people they never thought they could be. Mom, what do you want from me? Nothing. We don't deserve your forgiveness and we don't expect it. We just want you to know that we understand what we did was wrong and we're committed to making whatever restitution is possible. Even if that means going to prison. But Colin, if you're willing to support a plea agreement, we'd like the chance to prove that we can become better people. Not for our sake, but for the chance to eventually earn back some small part of your respect. Driving home from that meeting, I realized that my desire for justice had evolved into something more complex. I still wanted my parents to face consequences for their crimes, but I also wanted them to have the opportunity for redemption and growth. The choice between vengeance and mercy was mine to make, and it would determine not just their future, but the kind of person I would become in the aftermath of their betrayal. 6 months later, I stood in my completely renovated apartment, looking out at the Phoenix skyline as the sun set behind the mountains. The space felt truly mine again, not just legally, but emotionally. The walls had been repainted in colors. I chose the furniture reflected my taste and needs, and every corner held evidence of the life I was rebuilding. Sarah Mitchell knocked on my door at exactly 7 p.m. carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the bright smile that had become the best part of my daily routine. We had met 3 months earlier at a financial literacy workshop where I was volunteering to help other young adults who had experienced family financial abuse. "How was the session today?" she asked, settling onto the couch beside me. "Difficult, but productive. We had a young woman whose parents had stolen her student loan money and a guy whose siblings had maxed out credit cards in his name. Their stories reminded me how common this problem really is." Sarah was a high school teacher who specialized in working with students from difficult family situations. Her background had helped her understand the complex emotions I was processing as my relationship with my parents slowly evolved. "Any word from your parents today?" "Dad called this morning. He's been sober from gambling for 4 months now, and he starts his new job at the nonprofit accounting firm next week." My father had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, but he had served only 6 months before being released to a halfway house program that focused on rehabilitation and restitution. His cooperation with the FBI investigation had led to the recovery of over $800,000 stolen from elderly clients, which had influenced the court's decision to emphasize treatment over punishment. He sounded different on the phone, more like the father I remembered from when I was younger. "What do you mean?" "Humble, grateful, focused on making amends rather than making excuses." My mother had received probation and community service in exchange for paying full restitution and attending financial counseling sessions. She had liquidated her rental properties, paid her back taxes with penalties, and was working as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit organization. Mom sent me a check for $500 today. It's part of her monthly restitution payments, but she also included a note saying she wants to rebuild trust slowly and prove that she's changed. Sarah curled up against my side, her presence a constant reminder that trust and intimacy were still possible after betrayal. "How do you feel about their progress?" Cautiously optimistic. "They're doing everything right, attending their counseling sessions, making their payments, respecting the boundaries I've set. But I'm not ready to let my guard down completely." The past 6 months had taught me valuable lessons about the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. I had forgiven my parents in the sense that I no longer carried anger or desire for revenge. But rebuilding trust would be a long process that required consistent evidence of changed behavior. I've been thinking about extending the no contact period for another 6 months, not as punishment, but to give all of us more time to establish new patterns. That sounds wise. Healing takes time, especially when the wounds come from people who were supposed to protect you. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica Walsh. The civil lawsuit against my parents had been settled with them agreeing to pay damages for emotional distress and financial harm. The money would help fund the financial abuse prevention program I was developing with a local nonprofit. Jessica says the final paperwork is ready for signing. Once this is complete, the legal aspects of everything will be finished. How does that feel? Like closure, but also like a beginning. I had learned that surviving family betrayal required rebuilding not just practical aspects of life like housing and finances, but also fundamental beliefs about trust relationships and personal boundaries. The process had been painful, but ultimately strengthening. Uncle Marcus stopped by later that evening bringing dinner from our favorite Mexican restaurant. He had become a steady presence in my life, filling some of the family connection that had been damaged by my parents' actions. "Any updates on Vincent's situation?" I asked as we ate. "The FBI arrested him last week for tax evasion and illegal lending practices. Your parents' cooperation provided evidence that helped build the case against him." "What happens to his debt collection business?" "Dissolved. The people who owed him money are working with federal authorities to resolve their situations through legitimate financial counseling rather than intimidation." Marcus had been instrumental in helping me navigate the complex aftermath of my parents' crimes. His guidance had helped me understand that seeking justice didn't require destroying people, and that accountability could coexist with compassion. "Marcus, do you think my parents have really changed?" "I think they've experienced consequences severe enough to force genuine self-examination. Whether that translates into permanent change depends on their continued commitment to the work they're doing." As the evening wound down, I found myself reflecting on the journey from that terrible night when my key wouldn't work to this moment of cautious peace. The experience had revealed reserves of strength and resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I'd started a nonprofit organization called Financial Family Justice, Bez Membres d'Anchofpanch, that helped young adults who had been financially abused by relatives. The program provided legal resources, counseling support, and practical assistance for people rebuilding their lives after family betrayal. The hardest part of this whole experience, I told Sarah as we prepared for bed, wasn't losing my money or my apartment. It was losing my belief that family relationships were inherently safe and trustworthy. But you've gained something too. You've learned that you can survive betrayal and come out stronger. You've learned to set boundaries and demand respect. You've learned that forgiveness doesn't require accepting continued mistreatment. Looking around my restored apartment, I felt grateful for the life I had rebuilt. The furniture was nicer than what I had before. My financial situation was actually stronger because the legal settlement and restitution payments had forced me to develop better money management skills. My relationships were deeper because I had learned to value people who respected boundaries and demonstrated trustworthiness. Standing at my bedroom window, I thought about the young man who had stood in this same spot 6 months earlier, confused and betrayed and seemingly powerless. That person couldn't have imagined the strength he would discover or the life he would create from the ashes of family destruction. My phone rang one final time that day. It was my father calling from the halfway house. "Colin, I know you weren't expecting to hear from me again so soon, but I wanted you to know that I start my community service tomorrow at a financial counseling center for seniors. I'll be helping elderly people protect themselves from the kind of financial abuse I used to perpetrate." How does that feel? Like the first meaningful work I've done in years. Like maybe I can use my experience to prevent other families from going through what we went through. "Dad, I'm glad you're finding ways to make amends. But I want you to know that rebuilding our relationship will take years, not months." "I understand. I'm not looking for forgiveness or reconciliation right now. I'm just trying to become someone worthy of those things eventually." After hanging up, I realized that my parents' journey toward redemption was separate from my own journey toward healing. I could support their efforts without compromising my boundaries. I could hope for their success without sacrificing my well-being. The apartment that had been stolen from me had become more than just a home. It had become a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of fighting back against injustice, and a foundation for building something better than what had been destroyed. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are struggling with demons we can't see or understand. Sometimes families break in ways that seem irreparable. But sometimes with courage and boundaries and patience, something new and stronger can grow from the wreckage. Standing in my reclaimed space surrounded by people who had proven their trustworthiness through actions rather than words, I understood that home isn't just a place you inherit or purchase. Home is something you build through choices, defend through strength, and share with people who value what you've created. My parents had tried to steal my home. Instead, they had forced me to discover what home really means. I want to ask you something that's been weighing on my mind since sharing this story. Have you ever experienced a situation where the people closest to you betrayed your trust in ways that seemed unforgivable? How did you find the strength to rebuild, and what helped you decide between seeking revenge or choosing a path toward healing and growth? If this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own struggles with family relationships and boundaries, please hit the like button and let me know in the comments below. Your experiences and insights help create a community where people can share their stories and support each other through difficult times. And if you found value in hearing about this journey from betrayal to recovery, please consider subscribing to hear more stories about resilience, justice, and the complex process of healing from family trauma. Sharing this video with friends or family members who might benefit from these messages of hope and strength would mean the world to me. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community that believes people can survive betrayal, demand justice, and still choose compassion when the dust settles. I hope your own journey toward healing and growth brings you peace, strength, and the kind of home that no one can ever take away from you. Remember that you deserve relationships built on respect and trust, and you have the right to protect yourself from people who would harm you even when those people are family. Take care of yourselves, set healthy boundaries, and never be afraid to fight for the life you deserve to live.